The future of motoring may take many forms, but the way things look at present, it seems that electric propulsion will have much to do with it. To date, that's been an expensive solution, particularly with all-electric cars large enough for the average family. But Renault reckons it needn't be, and for proof, presents this car, the Fluence Z.E. Motoring has reached a historic turning point, or so Renault hopes. If that's not the case, then the £3.5 billion the French brand has invested in an electric automotive future is going to look very speculative indeed. But I think the accountants can rest easy. Rival manufacturers are also investing huge sums in milk float style mobility. The difference with Renault, though, is that its zero emissions models are on sale right now. And here's the one most fit for families, the Fluence Z.E. This is by far the most affordable, decently sized all-electric car we've seen so far, borrowing technology from its closest but much pricier rival, Nissan's Leaf, and sharing it with a whole range of other battery-powered Z.E. Renault models. The Twizy lightweight city car, the little ZOE hatchback, and an electrified version of the Kangoo van. Unless you really do need the typical 500-mile range that most conventional petrol and diesel models provide, and the majority of us don't, then the all-electric option is one that an increasing number of buyers are going to find it harder and harder to ignore. And if they've families and a realistic budget to consider, then this car will need to be way up their shopping lists. Let's check it out. So, if for you the electric automotive revolution starts right here, what do you notice behind the wheel? Two things probably. One expected, the silence, once you've twisted the old-fashioned ignition key. This is the one type of car I would have expected to find a starter button. The car's tweeted its readiness, and you move off. The other, though, is a surprise, or at least it will be if you haven't driven an electric car before. Namely, the quite astonishing speed away from rest, with 30 miles an hour just 4.1 seconds away. Think about it, though, and that makes perfect sense. After all, the Dodgems that you used to drive as a kid at the fair, well, they were pretty quick away from the mark, weren't they? And so it is here. While a combustion engine must work its way up to peak power, with an electric power pack, all of the torque, all of 226 Newton meters in this case, is available from rest. The result is that this Fluence becomes unexpectedly perky urban transport. See a gap in the traffic and you can dive straight for it. The 70 kilowatt electric motor, which puts out the equivalent of 95 brake horsepower, feeling crisp and actually remarkably responsive. And of course, as with all electric models, you've got the equivalent of an automatic gearbox, so there are no gear changes to worry about. On the open road, though, things are a little different, for thanks to the 280 kilogram battery pack this car has to lug around with it, performance tails off rather dramatically after 30 miles an hour, though the 0-60 time of 13.7 seconds is quicker actually than I was expecting. At least once you do reach your chosen cruising speed, things are comfortable, and of course, progress is virtually silent. Provided, of course, that you're not on an autobahn and needing to travel faster than the necessarily rather limited top speed of 84 miles an hour. Highways, though, are places where your thoughts tend to rather nervously turn to the issue that'll dominate consideration of day-to-day use of this vehicle, that of operating range. Renault talks airily about this subject, quoting research showing that 87% of daily journeys involve driving 37 miles or less, and suggesting that on that basis, the Fluence Z.E's combined cycle quoted operating range of 115 miles should be quite sufficient for the majority of customers, which would be true providing that that was accessible. The French maker itself admits that extreme or really poor weather conditions combined with sporty driving, hilly routes and liberal use of the heating and the air conditioning can reduce your operating range to as little as 50 miles or less. For myself, I've found that the actual operating range you get is somewhere between these two extremes, and as long as you plan around that, then you shouldn't have too much of a problem. Interestingly, what won't reduce your range is urban traffic. Unlike internal combustion engine vehicles, electric ones are at their most efficient in built-up areas and snarled-up traffic jams. After all, when the vehicle is at a standstill, the electric motor isn't using any energy. In fact, quite the opposite is true, because the systems that enable this Renault to recover energy under deceleration work at their best in town conditions with all the repeated braking and stopping. And that means that in town you can potentially increase your operating range to as much as 125 miles. Of course, it'll be up to the driver to play his or her part in maximising the operating range available. If you thrash the thing up and down the road all the time, don't be surprised to see the battery charge indicator on the dash dropping down at an alarming rate. You'll find this on the left-hand side of the central speedometer in the instrument binnacle. On the right-hand side of the speedo, you'll find what Renault calls an econometer, which is there to show you how your energy is being used. Now, you'll start off with the econometer needle pointing straight up into a light blue segment that indicates that the vehicle is being driven normally. Now, from there, the needle will either drop left into a darker blue segment that you'll see when you're braking or cruising and the vehicle is recovering energy, or the needle will go to the right into a red section that you'll get when you're heavily using the throttle in a way that will quickly shorten the distance you can travel. For me, though, the more important readout is provided by this digital display just above the econometer gauge that shows your remaining driving range in miles, as well as the 22 kilowatt lithium-ion battery's remaining capacity and both average and instantaneous energy consumption. Now, you can improve all of these figures by making liberal use of the Eco button here on the climate control system that restricts the amount that this will draw from the battery power. Now, with Eco activated and a responsible driving style adopted, Renault reckons that you can increase your operating range by as much as 18%. When you do need to charge up, then you've got various options. If you're fortunate enough to be near a so-called fast charge point, say one you'll find at a Renault Z.E dealer, then you can charge 80% of the battery's capacity from empty in just 30 minutes. But you're far more likely to be near a standard public or business-based charge point, or indeed the wall box that Renault suggests you get installed either at your home or wherever the vehicle is most likely to be garaged. Now, charging from empty at one of these will take between 6 to 8 hours, but bear in mind that you don't have to keep the car connected up for that long. You can just charge it whenever the car's stopped for a few hours to top things up, say when you're shopping or when you're at a business meeting. Now, there are over 50,000 standard public charge points in operation across Western Europe, with 240 more being added to that total every day. There are plenty of eco websites that'll show you where these are, and this Fluence itself will automatically guide you to one when its charge gets low, courtesy of its standard Carmanat TomTom Live satellite navigation system. Now, this is my local charging point, and to use it, like all electric car owners, I've had to buy a smart card like this from my local council. Now, they cost about £50, from £50 upwards, depending on what part of the country that you're in. A charge that will usually cover the electricity you'll be drawing from the socket. Some councils even give you free parking with it too, but mine doesn't. Once you do find a public charging point, then it'll have one of two kinds of socket. The first will be the kind of socket you'll get on the wall box that Renault suggests you install at home. It'll look a bit like this. Here though, I've got a public charging point with a normal 3-pin socket. So for that you'll need to buy an extra cost lead from your Renault dealer and approach the socket, swipe your card, open the flap and plug it in. It's pretty straightforward. Then once you've done that, you've got 2 charging points, one either side of the vehicle on the front wings here, and you simply pull back the flap and plug straight in. Now this extra cost lead with a 3-pin socket is the one that you'll also need if you're plugging in to a normal 240 volt domestic supply at home. That's something Renault suggests you don't do too often. And of course you can top the vehicle up like that as and when you need to. Let's say that you're visiting friends for dinner and you rather cheekily plug your 3-pin lead in to their garage while you're inside their house for 3 hours or so. That would give you 25 miles or so of operating range, which would probably be enough to get you home. So, back from shopping, ready to get mobile again. Now, a few things I wondered about that may also be concerning you. No, the car won't suddenly stop when the range runs out. It'll continue on at reduced power for a distance that'll hopefully be enough to get you to your nearest charging point. If it isn't, then the free recovery service that comes with the battery will tow you to your nearest point or one of your choice. What else? Battery leakage? No, that isn't a problem these days, so you won't come back from holiday and find that your battery's flat and you can't go anywhere. Charging in the rain's no problem either. And no, you can't drive off inadvertently while still connected to the charging point, as the vehicle's ignition is disconnected when you're wired up. As I said earlier on, it's no problem just to charge top up for short periods. You don't have to completely discharge the battery as you used to have to with batteries in the old days. And what if you have to do a really long journey, you know, something once a year, perhaps the annual family holiday? Well, Renault's thought of that too, offering Fluence Z.E buyers a mobility guarantee, which will give them short-term rental of a conventional, an ordinary petrol or diesel engine model at preferential rates. And overall, well, yes, I know that electric motoring can sound quite complicated, but you very quickly adjust and start treating this like any other ordinary family car, which is easy to do because it drives just like one. In fact, the potential is there for the handling to be quite sharp, given the central location of the batteries under the car, which provides a very low centre of gravity that on some of Renault's smaller electric models gives them really eager turn into tight corners. Now that's masked on this one by a rather soft setup which discourages such behaviour, but wafts you over the worst of tarnished tarmac. More noticeable even than that, though, is the engine braking you get as the vehicle's kinetic energy is recovered by the motor, converting it into electric current, which then charges the battery. It's so pronounced that unless you're actually coming to a stop, you find yourself hardly ever using the brake pedal at all in ordinary day-to-day motoring. Now, there are two schools of thought when it comes to designing an electric vehicle, and the Renault-Nissan alliance has championed both of them. In the Nissan Leaf, we've a futuristic flight of fancy, a model that shouts its eco-credentials from the rooftops, and provides the underpinnings here for a car that couldn't be more different. Low-key and conservative, the Fluence Z.E will have no one noticing as you glide silently past. Unless they're students of automotive design, seamlessly building in a dustbin-sized quarter-ton battery pack without seriously compromising either looks or practicality is just about possible if, as with the Leaf, you're styling a car from scratch. But it's very difficult indeed to do if you've to work within the confines of an existing shape. In this case, the Turkish-built four-door version of the Renault Megane hatchback, not sold here but offered in Europe with a range of conventional engines. For the Fluence design team, there was nothing for it but to add in 5 inches of extra rear length to accommodate the batteries banked behind the back seat. This explains the slightly awkward looking elongated side profile, but from most other angles this Renault has a smartly conservative look with plenty of intricate detailing to distract the eye. At the front there's eco-minded blue tinting for the headlights, the fog lamps, even the grille. While the rear end is livened up by tail lights incorporating a strip of blue tinted diamond shapes. Nothing overt enough though to overly attract the attention of the neighbours unless they happen to notice the ZE badging, the lack of an exhaust tailpipe or the charging flaps in both front wings. And if the outside is conventional, the interior is even more so. You start off with an old-fashioned key before releasing an old-fashioned handbrake. Unfortunately, the wheel adjustment's old-fashioned too. Offhand, I can't think of any other modern family-sized car that doesn't have reach adjustment for the steering wheel these days. Here it only goes up and down. Still, it's relatively easy once you're in to get a comfortable driving position thanks to the well-proportioned seat and careful ergonomic design that includes a large centrally positioned colour screen, a good view of the chrome ringed instruments and fingertip controls around the steering wheel. One touch I really like is the way that it's possible to pre-condition the air conditioning, the heating and ventilation system when the vehicle is on charge, so that once you're on the move you don't waste battery energy overcooling or overheating the cabin. And there are also plenty of practical touches, with more than 23 litres of total cabin orbment space. And there's decent enough room for people too, of a kind that's in a different league to many of the all-electric models that rival manufacturers will offer you for the same kind of overall budget. Now, this comes courtesy of rear seat passenger space that's a lot more generous than you might expect for what is essentially a four-door version of Renault's Focus-sized Megane family hatchback, with decent standards of head, leg, knee and shoulder room. That's quite sufficient for 2 adults to sit comfortably or 3 to sit alongside one another for shorter journeys. My 3 children have certainly been very comfortable back here. In fact, this was their very first taste of all-electric motoring, since the entry-level electric models from Peugeot, Citroën and Mitsubishi that I'd previously tested, rather annoyingly, didn't even come fitted with 3 rear seat belts. Out back, the 317 litre boot is exactly the same size as you'll find in an ordinary Ford Focus, but the lithium-ion battery pack means that it's slightly awkwardly shaped. The battery pack itself also gets in the way of the option you'd normally have on an ordinary saloon or family hatchback of being able to push forward the rear bench to accommodate longer loads. Still, you do get a loading bay that has a wide aperture, a low sill, a useful underfloor compartment, and a section over here to the right of the battery pack where you can store the rather neat bag that Renault will give you to accommodate all your charging leads. Renault is certainly trying everything it knows to make electric motoring look more affordable. Separating out vehicle purchase price from the cost of a battery you have to separately lease makes this Fluence Z.E appear to be by far the cheapest family-sized all-electric vehicle on the market, with prices that'll probably see you paying somewhere in the £18,000 to £19,000 bracket once the £5,000 PICG plug-in car grant provided by the government is subtracted from the initially off-putting asking price. But once you've added the cost of a necessary wallbox home charging point, an extra 3-pin plug charging lead, and most importantly, the ownership term battery leasing fees to that, you're looking at an overall cost that's probably the same or perhaps even a little more than you'd pay for all-electric city cars from other brands like the Mitsubishi Myzd, the Citroën C0 or the Peugeot Ion. That's no bad thing. This Fluence Z.E is a much bigger machine than a city car, so you're getting far more for your money. And though Renault is the only brand that charges extra for the battery that'll power your electric motoring, this model is still able to substantially undercut its only similarly sized all-electric rival. That's Nissan's Leaf, a car that will cost you around £26,000, even after the subtraction of the £5,000 government grant. Ultimately, you'd have to say that even with everything included, this Renault's value proposition looks compelling. Let's say that when everything's taken into account, you're looking at, let's say, £22,000 if you go for a Fluence Z.E with a decent spec, get a wall box home charging point, an extra 3-pin charging lead, and budget for, say, 3 years of a battery lease. Now, that's still way off the £30,000 or so budget you'd need for either a plug-in hybrid, like a Toyota Prius or a Peugeot 3008 Hybrid 4, or an e-Rev, or extended range electric vehicle like Chevrolet's Volt or Vauxhall's Ampera. Now, cars from both these categories build in combustion engines to run alongside their electric powertrains. But if you don't need the extended range that'll give you, then this Renault provides a far cheaper and more eco-minded solution at a price that'll probably undercut what you'd pay for a conventional Mondeo-sized medium-range diesel alternative. Nor has Renault compromised on equipment to make this model affordable. After all Fluence Z.E variants come with automatic dual-zone air conditioning, auto headlamps and wipers, electric mirrors, a decent quality 4-speaker MP3 compatible CD stereo with fingertip controls, and a Carmanat TomTom Live satellite navigation system that's able to display your remaining driving range and navigate you, if necessary, to the nearest charging point. It also can give you road safety alerts and a 5-day weather forecast, and has a Google local search function. Plusher Fluence Z.E variants, like the one I've got here, have things like rear parking sensors, alloy wheels, front fog lights, Bluetooth compatibility for your mobile phone, and the option of supple leather upholstery. An important touch when you take delivery will be what Renault calls your Z.E box. Now, this is where you'll find all the important information related to the vehicle, the contracts that you'll need associated with it, your battery, the battery charging, and all the other associated services. Another nice Fluence feature that owners will appreciate is the Myzd Connect pack that will enable you to remotely check your battery's charging status and your remaining operating range via either a smartphone or a computer. As for safety, well, that's well taken care of with twin front, side and curtain airbags, Isofix child seat fastenings, and the usual electronic assistance for braking, traction and stability control. So, just how much more efficient can all-electric motoring really be? Well, let me try and explain it like this. An electric motor has an efficiency rating of 90%. A figure that drops to just 25% for an ordinary petrol engine. So out of every 10 kilowatts of energy, 9 kilowatts makes it to the tarmac from an all-electric vehicle, as opposed to just 2.5 kilowatts from a petrol engine. So much more of the grunt that the powertrain is generating is actually making it onto the road. And of course, the energy to source that powertrain will cost you less too. Depending on how you calculate it and the price that you're paying for your electricity, plugging in this Fluence Z.E will be about, well, anywhere between 5 to 10 times cheaper than pouring fuel into it. And the advantage of having your own wall box at home or at your place of business will be that you can choose to charge at cheaper off-peak rates. But even if you can't do that, then you should be looking at no more than about £3 to fully charge this car from empty. Where the Fluence Z.E scores another knockout blow is if you have to regularly travel into the congestion zones. London offers 100% exemption, and as an added bonus, Westminster City Council will give you 4 hours free parking and a number of charging points. Renault, though, hasn't yet got its head around the issue that most urban drivers have to leave their cars parked out on the streets, so have no practical way of recharging them from a home-based power point. Still, consider the benefits, because they just keep coming. Electric cars have long been exempt from company car tax. That means company car drivers will pay 0% benefit in kind tax if they buy an electric vehicle. And companies will be able to claim 100% of the cost of this Renault electric model back against corporation tax in the first year of ownership. Finally, maintenance costs via a special programmed maintenance plan will be about 20% lower than they would be for an ordinary diesel model. There's no timing belt, for example, no air filter, no fuel filter, and of course no oil changes will be required. Service intervals are every 18,000 miles, and there's a 3-year 100,000 mile warranty. And a 5-year 100,000 mile warranty that covers the electrical drivetrain. So far, so good. But there have to be downsides, don't they? Well, with this Fluence Z.E, the drawbacks that there are lie in all the bits and pieces that you have to add to the asking price. The major issue here being Renault's decision to separate vehicle and battery ownership. So once you've decided whether to outright purchase or lease this car, you've then to take out a leasing contract for the battery that will power it. The amount of which will depend on the term that you choose and the annual mileage that you're likely to cover. Now, to give you an idea of how much the battery lease might cost you, at the time of this vehicle's launch, Renault was quoting a monthly leasing fee of about £80 a month, including VAT, for those prepared to commit to a 3-year contract on a restricted but reasonable annual mileage of about 9,000 miles. That equates to about 11 pence per mile and a total outlay over the 3-year period of just under £3,000. Bear in mind, though, that if you shorten the term of the contract and or increase your projected annual mileage, well, if you do either of those things, your battery monthly outlay is likely to increase substantially. You'll need to talk to your dealer for specifics on this, and that just won't be any Renault dealer. It'll need to be one of a network of Z.E specialist outlets, and there aren't too many of those. There were just 20, in fact, at the time of this model's launch. So you'll need to check whether proximity to your local specialist is going to be an issue. As long as it isn't, and you've sorted out your battery subscription, then you've got the peace of mind of knowing that that agreement will guarantee that your battery will always have a charge capacity of at least 75% of the original. Batteries deteriorate over time, you see. Now, according to Renault, this will help resale values, as it'll allay any concerns that second-hand buyers may have of a battery condition. Whatever your view on that, you can't argue with the benefits of the comprehensive roadside assistance agreement that the battery package will give you. It'll make sure that should you ever be stranded with a flat battery by the roadside, then recovery will always be on hand to tow you to the nearest charging point. And talking of charging points, on top of the vehicle purchase price and the battery subscription, you'll also have to budget for one of those, since Renault frowns upon operators charging their cars from a normal 3-pin plug-in, even if that were to be business practicable. Renault works with British Gas for the installation of such specific charging points. They're called wall boxes, and the cost for having one installed is around £800, excluding the VAT. Now, the charging lead that you'll need for such a wall box is, of course, included within the price of the car. But rather annoyingly, the separate lead that you'll need with a normal 3-pin plug, that's the one that you'll need where you come across a public charging point that uses 3-pin plugs, or the lead that you'll want when you occasionally want to plug your Fluence into a normal domestic supply. Well, that specific lead, rather annoyingly, costs extra. It's around £400 or so more, and you'll get it from your Renault dealer. Ultimately, though, electric motoring is a different kind of transport, and it's to be expected that there'll be a different way of paying for it. What's important is that once you take all your costs into account, Different, in this case, means substantially cheaper. Now, I get that all-electric motoring isn't everybody's preference. What I don't understand is why more people aren't prepared to at least give it a try. I just don't accept most of the objections. Take restricted range. How many families do you know able to spend £20,000 on a new car that have just a single vehicle in their household? As a family backup to something more conventional, this Fluence might be just about perfect. Costing no more than an ordinary diesel alternative, yet a car that costs just pennies to run. In an era where most vehicles spend over 90% of their lives being parked up and nearly all family second cars are used for short hops only, you could certainly argue that this Renault is a car of its time before its time. Of course, if electric technology is to truly establish itself as the solution of tomorrow, then things have a way to go yet. It's not that more sophisticated batteries with greater capacities don't exist. It's more that they can't be brought to market at a price that would make them a realistic fitment in an affordable family car, which is exactly what this Fluence is. It has smarter, more sophisticated competition, of course, but there isn't much else that'll seem as sensible to people in the volume market who need to balance eco-preferences with the need for spacious day-to-day transport. If Renault can persuade them to think differently, then who knows what the future will bring.